Just record to the
Uh,
Hey, Tony.
hey, Melanie, how you doing?
I'm doing well. How are you?
Uh,
Yeah, well, you're like,
working hard, working hard.
that's right. Well, I wanted to do a little Zoom and record today and kind of talk a little bit about your book, The Precipice. It just came out with Gnomic Books late in 2021, but it should have been in 2022 almost. It took a little while. That's something maybe we'll discuss a little bit later on too, about which we hope people won't be encountering quite as much in upcoming years, but supply chain issues that happen with it, or just shipping delays. But the book just came out. It's ready to purchase. You have limited editions that are on your site, and Gnomic Book has the trade edition. You have some trade edition that are on your site too. And I mean, I'll kind of just start introducing this a little bit as I've always loved your work. And you and I met, I think at Review Santa Fe, maybe the first time.
That was
Many years ago. And then we had the opportunity, I had a funder. Somehow you and I made connections again, and maybe you can bring my mind back around to this, but we had a funder who was looking at projects. I was working with him on another project, and I showed him your work. And initially he was incredibly interested, and we kind of had him on board, and then we had some difficulties once COVID happened with the project. So that kind of put us back with that. But I can't exactly remember how I wanted to show him your work. But you and I think that you, along with another artist, and I'll mention her name, Susan Worsham, who's one of my favorites. I've loved, adored her work for years. There's been a few photographers who just kind of continually stuck in my mind, who I've really liked them as people, but I've also really liked their work. And so I think I may have sent him a list of some of my top ones that I've kind of kept in my mind who I thought should have books, and you were one of those. And so that kind of started the whole process. And then as COVID hit and some of that kind of fell through, we'll go over a little bit more of the process of publishing the book as we go along. But what I kind of wanted you to start out with, especially with the Precipice, is to describe the project a little, so we kind of get a little bit of a basis for the people who haven't seen the work. And then we'll talk a little bit more about the book, about how it's kind of 3 projects almost in one, and the fantastic essays, the texts that you have included in this piece are, I think, quite phenomenal. And so if you can give a little bit of background about you as a photographer, and then also this particular project, and then we'll kind of get into describing the book a little bit as we go along.
well. I've been a photographer now for 40 years. I can't believe it, but that's what it is. I've been teaching for 20 years, teaching photography for 20 years, and so the Precipice came about because of 3 projects that I've had sitting around for a while, and one of them was titled the Surgical Theater Series, and it's about pictures in surgery. And so, the idea of that project came about because of a book that I saw called The Morning's Work, and it's pictures by collection of pictures by Stanley Burns. And so I bought that book because I was a medical photographer at that time, and I was just absorbing as much as I could see of artists making work about the medical imagery. And so that book is really the one that really started that project. And there's some pictures in there that are really beautiful, very Rembrandt-esque. The lighting is very theatrical. And so I said, I want to do this. I want to, try to make pictures like that. But I didn't have access to making work probably, I would say maybe 8 years into working as a medical photographer. So, I did ask administration, I asked the public relations department, and they always said, no. But at some point, I guess that maybe I asked them so many times, or they saw that I was a honest employee, that they said yes. And so the only thing that they told me is that I couldn't identify the people. And, because of HIPAA, you can't do that.
Mhm.
And so I worked really hard making images that didn't have any type of identification. I do have a lot of photographs that have that, but they're not in the book. So we at least I made it a selection process that I stuck to that, to
Mhm.
not identifying anybody, which means, no tattoos, no faces, no birthmarks, the whole thing that the HIPAA doesn't allow you to do. So while I was doing that project, then, I kept on looking at the surgeons' work with these instruments, these surgical instruments. I thought they were sculptures. I thought they were beautiful. I mean, they're
Mhm.
just like an art piece of itself. And so
And they're very anthropomorphic, the way
yeah,
that
yeah,
yeah, they relate really well. It's interesting.
yeah. And so my initial thought was just buying used surgical tools and
Mhm.
sticking them in a shadow box. That was my initial idea, and just doing like like showing them in a gallery or something. But as I started researching and wanting to buy some, they're just way expensive. Even the used ones, they were just way too much for me. So I said, wait a minute, why don't I just try to make them so realistic photographically that I can still put them in a shadow box and it looks like they're real? And that's what I did. So I photographed them in a way that they just look like they're floating in the air.
Yeah.
And of course, the selection process, as a photographer, you're always selecting. John Sarkowski always says that, all we do is point and select. That's what we do as photographers. So the selection process is like, what does these tools look like? And so I was looking for them as, do they look feminine? Do they look masculine?
Mhm.
Do they look like uh, pairs, like a family or husband and wife, that kind of stuff. And then depending on what I saw in them, then that's when I selected the color background. I was looking at all sorts of artists at that time, Neil Wernicker, and of course Walker Evans.
Mhm.
So I applied to graduate school, got accepted, and I went to Columbia University, and that's when I did the last chapter of this book, which is the project that I did in the morgue. And of
Mhm.
course, that's a little bit darker, and it's strange because my first day of graduate school was September 11, 2001, and so I was doing this project while I was in graduate school. And when I had teachers coming to my studio, nobody wanted to come in because nobody wanted to see death any more than what they have seen already.
Mhm.
So it was tough. It was tough to show this work then. And it's always been tough to show this work.
Mhm.
I think more because of the perception that people have, that they think they're going to see all sorts of disgusting things, and really you see just beautiful cloth and stainless steel. And it was the hardest thing I've ever photographed. The stainless steel is so reflective, and so I had to really um, understand the whole concept of using flash. And so I learned a lot while I was doing that project.
Mhm.
So those three were three different projects, but it came around to be in a book. And I met Alejandro Cartagena, who's an incredible artist, and I asked him a bunch of questions, and I sent him my work, and I think he was the very first person that said, "Yeah, I think it could be done. I think these three projects can be done." He made some book dummies, and I said, "Okay, well, great." I mean, I loved a lot of the things that he did, and I didn't like a lot of the things that he did.
Yeah.
But at least I was able to see that the three projects can come together as one.
Yeah.
And so that's that's how it got here,
Yeah, and earlier on we had the connection with the initial funder with John Gossage as well. And
Right.
John was incredibly excited about the project too. It even took his hand at doing some of the design. So it was
Right.
very interesting to watch the organic development of what you and I did, kind of playing with some of the images, giving
Right.
it to John, giving it to Alejandro, and then Jason
Right.
Koxvold of Gnomic just taken, into another direction. And it's been like it's had, at least 4 or 5 different treatments. So
Yeah. And
it was
I've had people ask me like, were you a part of any of the design? And I said, well, yes and no, obviously. And this is when I talk about, like, I wasn't afraid of giving my images to somebody and seeing what could happen. There's a lot of photographers that are really afraid of, like, oh, you can't do this because it's my work, and you can't, I really, it didn't bother me because I knew that the work was strong enough, and they weren't going to put it together and make something different. This work is very hard to, like, create something different than what it is. I think it's more about the sequence, the pace, where the position, the size of the image in relationship with the page, and I think that Jason did an amazing job with it.
Well, I mean, when you say about different, though, I mean, I would kind of say that in some ways the designers, there is a difference in all of them that I think, like, almost threads in like some cultural ideas too, and then maybe different nationalities, like perception of death too,
Right,
and
right.
the way that it was treated. So I think this project in particular, it could transform, at least in how it wanted to talk about some of the subjects that you were dealing with. And I know they are, like, quite difficult for some people, but I think Jason did an incredible job putting all 3 of
Oh,
them
absolutely.
and telling the
I
story.
mean, we had a lot of discussion. It was Jason and Shane and myself. Obviously, the first sequence, I hated it, and so again, it was an educational process for them to understand what it means to be in surgery and what it meant to be in the morgue, and what happens in there. So just like John Gossage, the images that the way that he sequenced it, and we talked about this, it was very monotonous. It was very, you can perceive what the next image was going to be. And so,
well, it was a very repetition and very pattern like.
Right.
Yeah, which I think some of John's books themselves are very pattern like. So and occasionally there'll be something thrown in to kind of mix you up, but his, like, tell a story in a very specific sort of way. And then, like, when Alejandro got a hold of yours, he kind of jarred that, and then Jason kind of took it back down a little bit, but he most definitely, it has a different flow to it. They've all gone organically through these incredible.
Yes. So, explaining to them what it means to be in surgery, and the whole concept of syncopation, I think that then they understood, and then things started turning around. And then, I think that they were missing some images, and we talked about it, and then we put some images in, we took some images out. And they were very, very proactive with my input, and so I really like that. And they didn't shut me down at all. They just kept on fueling me and give me more ideas, give me more thoughts, and it ended up to be an object that I truly, truly love. What they did.
And the interior pages are a different paper, right? The color pages.
Yes. So the first chapter is black and white, and then the middle chapter is the color, which changes paper, and then the last chapter is black and white with the same paper. So the whole concept is that, for me, is like, you really have to stop and start, like, really analyzing what you just saw. And I think that it slows you down because the paper is thinner. and it's more delicate. So you really have to like slow down and really turn the pages, and which I think makes the viewer start analyzing and thinking about what they just saw.
And then some of the binding, we had talked about some of the stitching. You wanted to be able to see some of the stitching.
Yeah. We talked, Jason and I, and you and I talked a lot about, making some of these things have medical relationship. The whole concept of the spine of the book, and then like how do you expose the spine? And so we did that, and he was able to find a book binder or a book publisher that was able to do that. So when you open the book, some people think that the book is broken. And
I know, like I have a copy of it right here.
Yeah, so it's
right
not.
on my desk.
So you open it up, and so it opens up, and then you see the spine. So it exposes the spine, and it looks
very
like
much like stitches.
It looks like
it's got
stitches.
The way that the wax is sealed it up. It's a little messy in some sort of way almost. So it looks like it could be the way that stitches fall on the skin.
And Jason suggested that we should use black rather than white, because sometimes when you open the pages and they lay flat, you get to see it, and it looks like stitching again. It looks like somebody's been sutured, which is fantastic. So there's a lot of things that we spoke about that ended up to be really beautiful, and it ended up to be what I wanted.
Well, since we're talking about object nature, I want to go back and talk a little bit about budget and some of that, because we've talked a little bit about design, but we're talking about the object nature of what you've created. And then let's talk about a little bit about the limited edition too, and the elements that are included in that, and how you wanted to make it like a fetish object as well.
Yeah. So fundraising was something that I've never done ever in my life. And the fundraising happened during COVID, which I don't know. And by the way, I think that the reason why I think this book should be out there is because of COVID. I think that we've seen a lot, heard a lot about the things that happen in the hospital, and so many people passing away, and getting a glimpse in the news of the body bags and all that kind of stuff. So I think that I think it was the right time to publish this book. So the fundraising was very difficult for me because I've never done it before, and I did it during COVID. And so what I did was I wrote some words down, and of course you helped me, make it more colorful, I guess. And so I started sending it to friends and people that I worked with, some doctors and nurses, and just past students, believe it or not, helped fund this book. And I started getting some great feedback. People would say, "Oh my God, Tony, that's great. You're going to make this book. Sure, count me in." And so we started absorbing the money. Now I have to give Center a big thank you, because they were the fiscal sponsor, which means that some of these donors were able to get a tax write-off. And so that, I think that made a big difference. I think that if it was just me collecting money, maybe I wouldn't have gotten as much as I did.
Yeah, and your relationship with Center, which does Review Santa Fe, is because you were an alum of Review Santa Fe in the past, and Center sometimes will partner with some of their alum. So, and not being able to do it through your school, we kind of, which I've done with some of my other clients, just looked into that. Center was just open to do it. Of course, they do have some rules associated with that, and a fee and everything. But then they handled paying all the invoices and everything.
It was great.
So the money didn't have to pass through you and your accounting system, and you didn't have to receive that or pay it out.
That's right. Yeah. It was great. And so the money started getting bigger and bigger and bigger. And the only thing that I would do different if I had to do it again is that I would not stop fundraising, because at a certain point I stopped thinking that there was sufficient, enough money, and I shouldn't have done that. I should have just kept going until maybe, you know, the book was in the printer, and then I would say, okay, that's it. And then if there was any left over, then, you know, could have used it somewhere else. But unfortunately, there was a little bit that I have to pay out of my pocket, which is okay because it's only a small portion. And Jason, I think, was really good about finding the right printer. And of course, we had some difficulty with shipping because of all this craziness that happened during COVID. And, you know, I would have wanted the book a little bit sooner. And then, you know, because it was hot, you know, right when it was released at Paris Photo. And then we waited so many months in order to get it physically. So then, you know, people were asking me, where's the book? Where's the book? Where's the book? And so, you know, it got cold again, and then now it's getting hot again. So
Yeah,
those are the difficulties. So I had some donors that were really great, and they donated a lot of money, which was awesome. And at a certain point, I went back to some of those donors and said, hey, you know, we just need a little bit more so that we can get this, you know, through the finish line. And they were very happy, and they sent me some more money. So
yeah. And I'll say it's one thing that I talk about with some of my clients and other talks is just like the Review Santa Fe connection. You and I connected, and we've kind of touched base probably off and on for years since. So, and then you worked with a lot of these physicians, and you've kept in touch with a lot of them. So I think the whole thing about marketing, some people want it to be like a magic bullet in some ways, which occasionally it is. You know, occasionally your book just totally sells out, but just being able to keep up with your marketing, keep up with the connections, and just making sure that, and if you had not kept up with those people in some sort of way, even if like annually or however often you did it, it might have been a little more difficult to actually approach them to ask them for a good chunk of money to help support your book.
yeah, and I think that teaching is great because a lot of my past students, which like I said, I've been doing it for 20 years. A lot of my past students are successful individuals. I mean, I have a student who I gave thanks in the back of the book, Melanie Sanchez. She's a vice president of a bank. And so, you know, I mean, she took my class and, you know, did intro to black and white photography because she loved photography, and we kept in touch. And I reached out to her, and she goes, oh my God, yes, let's do it. And yeah, so, I mean, you'd be surprised the people that are willing to help you fund, you know, a book. And you just have to ask, and because you never know if they're going to say yes or no.
Yeah. Well, tell me a little bit about we'll go back to the limited edition. What's the limited, what else in the limited edition?
Sure. So I wanted to create this, I guess, like you said, a fetish object. And it all relates to how the instruments are sterilized. And so when I was in surgery, I would see these instruments come into surgery, and they come in these aluminum boxes that are steriled in, you know, in these ovens. And then they would pop them open, and I thought, wow, that's pretty cool. So then that always stayed in my head. So I whenever we were talking about this, I said, okay, let's see if I can recreate this sensation of, like, you know, having an object sterilized. And obviously it's not sterilized, but it looks like it's sterilized in the cloth that the instruments come in, right? And so I looked around, and I found, you know, these beautiful aluminum boxes. And so it has the title of the book. And so when you open the box, what you see is the surgical towel covering the book, the poster, and the limited edition prints that are in it. And then on top of the towel, it's a packet of sterile surgical gloves that you can use if you want to open everything up.
Just not for surgery if you want
to.
Yeah,
or you can use it whatever you want to use it for. So when you take the gloves off and then open the surgical towel inside the box, then you see the book, and then inside the book there is the poster of the tools, and then there's a archival inkjet print of one of the tools in 8x10, and then there's a silver gelatin print of an image from the surgical theater series.
Yeah.
So it's all wrapped in this beautiful blue material, and I use the tape also that they use in surgery to identify that the box has been steriled. So it's a special tape that when it gets heat, it has the lines become black. There's these lines that become black, so then they know it's sterilized.
Oh, wow. Okay.
Yeah, but I don't sterilize it, so the lines are not black. But
You're
I
not
use
steaming your book.
right. I'm not steaming the book. Yeah, and so it's almost the same size as the book. The book is 9x12, so it's just a little bit bigger, but it's about that size.
Okay. Well, you also, we were talking recently about an upcoming exhibition. Are there some things related to the work?
Yeah, so I'm having a book signing, which I'm very, very proud of, here in Miami at Books and Books. It's an independent bookstore. And I can tell you, as a photo student, I used to go to their first bookstore in Coral Gables, and I would sit there for hours and hours to look at the photo books that they carried. Obviously, I couldn't afford them, but they didn't bother me at all to look at them. And obviously, I dreamed that someday maybe my book would be sitting in their shelves selling, and they would have like these book signings and lectures of authors that would come in, and that was a dream of mine. And now my dream's coming, true. So they obviously changed their location. They have a bigger store in Coral Gables. So I'm having a book signing September 22nd in Miami.
2022, just in case.
2022, September 2022, yeah. And then next year, February of 23, I'm having a solo exhibition through University of Miami. They have a gallery in the Wynwood area, which is very, hippie kind of artsy, fartsy type of area in Miami. So University of Miami has their own gallery, and so they offered to show my work as a solo exhibition. And then in April 1st through May 7th in New York City, I'm gonna have a show in a place called Transmitter. So I'm very excited about that. And so these are things that, like you said, marketing. I reached out to these people. I send them a letter with images. I send them, links to the book, links to the review in the Washington Post. And out of the 3 that I sent out, I sent one to New Mexico, to Photo Forum, and I sent one to University of Miami, and I sent one to New York, and 2 of them said yes. So I mean, I'm going to keep doing that, but as of right now, it's a lot of work, and I just don't want to overwhelm myself with like, okay, is these prints going to be like traveling all over the place? So I have to like come down a little bit, and maybe for late 23, I'll try to see if I can find another show that I can put together.
Yeah, and ideally some of those shows would have books there to sell too.
Oh yeah, definitely. Yeah. The University of Miami, they said that yes, that I can bring the books and have a book signing. And since University of Miami is an educational, university, they're okay with me giving lectures to other classes. And obviously my classes are going to go, and we're going to talk about the work. And I have another friend that works at and he's going to bring his classes to the exhibition. So, it's always great. has a huge medical campus. And so the curator that is helping me put this together, I asked her if we can do like a press release to the doctors and medical students at the University of Miami and let them know about this project and see if they can, come by during the opening, or, I can come by whenever they want and give a lecture on the war.
Yeah, that's a great idea, just to keep your eyes and ears open and think how to expand the project as much as you possibly can as you're doing some of this work.
Yeah, and doctors have a lot of money, so they can maybe buy some
Yeah.
things.
There you go, or some prints or a limited
Right,
edition.
right.
Yeah, well, Tony, I'd kind of like to not make it too long for the people who are watching it, but I do want to ask you if you have, if there's photographers in the audience now, of course, we'd love some the book buyers, supporters, anything like that too. But if there's photographers who are watching, what advice would you have for that you would say that they most definitely do when they're producing a book, or maybe something that you would suggest that they not do when, like, maybe mistakes or things you may do differently?
The one thing that I would suggest is that I think that finding the right publisher for your work is the most important. And I think that I don't know if I was able to do that. And I think that having you on board and your knowledge on the style and, let's say, the different book publishers have a different style, and they have their own sensibility. Gnomic books, are Gnomic books, and you can tell that they're Gnomic books because of the way that Jason designed them and the way that he selects the subject matter and that kind of stuff. So I think that finding somebody that can help you find that perfect marriage of your work with the publisher, I think it's very important. And I'm very pleased that you were able to do that, because we talked about so many publishers, and you suggest, no, I don't think that one would work with your work, and yeah, let's go and reach out to them, and I think that was really fantastic. The other thing is, don't be afraid of giving up your images to somebody and seeing what they can do with it. Don't hoard them, and don't think that your sequence and your selection is the only way that your book is going to be made. Where you have no idea what another person can do with your images and how they can sequence and also I sent Jason not only my top tier, but I send them let's say my A tier, my B tier, and my C tier. I send them so much work.
Yeah.
And there were images in my C tiers that I said, they'll never pick that one. And they did. And it worked. And they put it in the right place, and it really merged with the other images. So sometimes what you have in your mind, you got to let go of it sometimes, because somebody can make something really beautiful with it.
And you met Jason at Review Santa Fe, I think, too. And you guys got along really well. So I would say that's another thing to watch out for when you're finding a publisher, making sure that you can gel with your personalities as well.
Yeah. And of course, you have publishers that you dream, like, oh my God, I want to publish with them. But then you realize that, your work is really not for that publisher. And you shouldn't be upset that they say no. You should say, it's okay. I mean, I had, when I went to Review Santa Fe last time, it was 2018, I think, or 2019 was the last time before COVID. And I met with a publisher, and she was very, very nice and very upbeat about my work. And basically she said, these are not the type of books that we publish. And she suggested some people, and that was very nice. So I think when somebody does that, take their suggestion and run with it, because that might be the right person. So,
and then once again, I'll mention before we go the essays that are in there.
Yes.
And highly recommend reading both of those, because we had reached out initially to David Campany, and because he had done some work on Walker Evans and the Walker Evans tool work and Walker Evans books. And I think he was too busy at the time or couldn't take it on. And he recommended someone else. And then Michelle.
His recommendation was perfect.
Yeah.
And I had a discussion with her via Zoom, We talked a lot about the work.
Will you say her name, Tony? I'm sorry.
Eugenie Shinkle.
Thank you very much. I
Yeah,
was drawing a little blank just for a second
Eugenie
there. So
Shinkle. And,
I
we
want to mention her name.
yeah, we discussed, she did her research. She looked at my work I'm sure that she looked at my work for a week because she had specific questions about specific images, and she really did her research, and she dug deep, and she really wanted to know more about my feelings about things, and she pulled things out of me that she wrote down, which were really great. I mean, I had some difficulty in photographing two scenarios when I was a medical photographer, and I had to seek therapy to overcome these images that I saw in real life. And she pulled that out of me, and she wrote it really beautifully. The way that she used the words and the selection of words that she used were, I would have never wrote it the way she did, but she wrote it beautifully.
Mm-hmm.
So, the thing about finding a text is that I really didn't want, let's say, I didn't want a photographer talking about my work.
Mm-hmm.
I didn't want that. And I wanted a female. And for some reason, I always remember my mom saying that females have suffered more than males have in our life, in this world. And I think that knowing about suffering, I think they would understand these images. And so when I met Michelle Otero, she is of Mexican descent. And so she understood death a lot more than the rest of us do. I mean, for some reason, Mexicans understand that because of their relationship with death and Day of the Dead and all that kind of stuff. So Shinkle, Eugenie wrote a very, let's say, academic paper
Mm-hmm.
about the project, and Michelle Otero wrote like a letter to somebody
Mm-hmm.
about her experience with death.
Yeah, it's beautiful.
Yeah, it's great. And then the last poem is a student of mine who I found out that she wrote poems, and she wrote a poem and published it in a literary magazine that we produce at school. And I asked her if she'd written anything about death, and she did. And the poem is really fantastic.
Mm-hmm.
And I mean, you have to read it. You got to buy the book and read it,
right,
so that you can get the experience. But I think that it's in the right place. I think that, again, Jason put the text in the right place. We had a discussion of like, where do we put it? Do we put it at the beginning? So it's kind of like, it's a mystery when you open the book. It starts with like a cloth that has a metaphor to a curtain that is going to open to something that maybe you've never seen. And then in the middle is some text, and then at the end, the poem ends really beautifully. So I think it's a well done, beautiful book. Not because it's mine. I think that the other thing that I can mention to photographers is that how it says it takes a village to raise a kid. Yeah, I think it takes a village to publish a book. I think that you can't be isolated. You need to reach out and find other experience and talent that will make your book better. And I think that these texts really makes the book amazing.
Yeah, I think so too. All right. Well, thanks so much, Tony. Thanks for talking to me today, and I hope
Thank you, Melanie. It's always
for some other people too.
It's always great. I think that this would not have happened if it wasn't because of you.
Yeah, well, I'm happy to support your work. Like I said, I've been a fan for many years. So.
I appreciate all of the work that you have done for this book, and
Yeah.
hopefully for more that are coming up.
Yeah, that's right. All right. Well, thanks so much, Tony.
All right. Take care.